All right, as Deputy Mayor of the town of Edson, I will call this meeting of the whole to order. May I have a motion that the agenda for the March 12, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented? Councillor Chenard will make that
Deputy
motion.
Mayor, I'd be more than happy to make that
Excellent.
motion.
Deputy Mayor Sorensen, if I may.
Yes.
We actually need a motion for it as amended, as there was a sundry item added.
So, may I have a motion that the agenda of the March 12, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as amended?
I will accept the amendment
All
and
right.
put the addition on for you.
Councillor Chard makes that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried. I got it. May I have a motion that the minutes of the February 26, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented? Mayor Zahara will make that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried. Do not have any delegations, department reports. We'll move on to reports from staff, executive office. We have a report on certificate of recognition for 2018 audit results by McKenna Stitzenberger. Great, welcome.
Thank you. I have just a few slides on a PowerPoint for you guys as well. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk to you guys just a little bit about some of the key strengths and suggestions for improvement, as well as comparing them to the previous year's audit results. So just a refresher, this was our results from the 2017 core audit. We had 85% overall. Noticing element 2 was kind of our weak spot there in 2017. So here's our 2018 core audit results. We got 84%. If you notice, element 2 got right back up there. This year we had a decrease in element 1. So this next slide is going to compare them, 2017 to 2018. So as mentioned, element 2 was our biggest increase, and element 1 was our biggest decrease. So just a couple things to keep in mind with those results. The 2017 audit was completed using an e-compliance tool, as the 2018 was completed using AMSA's Excel spreadsheet. So that's kind of the main reason for the different results throughout the 2 years there. This also means with the new legislation that came into play in June of 2018, there's going to be a new audit tool coming out this year that is also going to incorporate the 2 new elements to the core audit, which is Joint Health and Safety Committee and Workplace Violence and Harassment Prevention. So here's some key strengths. I just wanted to mention a couple other ones that aren't included here. It weren't included in your guys' report as well. The town, so this was from the words of our auditor, Sharon Young from AMSA. She says that the town has created a very open environment in which health and safety can be discussed, questions asked, information provided through a variety of methods, including the newsletter, emails, and meetings. She was very impressed with the wide variety of controls we have implemented throughout the different work sites, as well as our orientation for visitors and contractors at all of our locations as well. A few opportunities for improvement that again weren't included in your guys' report to council. So they really noticed that more employees were familiar with what we call the FLRA, field level risk assessment, hazard assessments, so done on the work site right before work commences, as compared to the formal hazard assessments that are developed at a high level, kind of overcompassing the whole job, very formal, very routine work. So just to get them a little more involved, ensuring that they realize that they are separate processes and how to utilize them both. Just to get more training on the hazard identification, that's always a good area to improve. That's how we keep our workers safe at work. So we just want to keep hammering home that training in regards to hazard assessment. And the other one thing that was interesting that she suggested to that obviously we just need to address a little bit better was just to ensure we are communicating the results of our audit. We passed with 84, that's awesome. we just want to make sure the whole organization is really aware of that. She suggested even getting managers to have specific meetings with their workers explaining the exact results. So I'm looking forward to getting that going. Summary, so I'm super happy with the results of the audit and with the external auditor that we have been utilizing now the past 2 years. I think it offers great insight to our program, having someone external with experience in other municipalities that they can bring to the table and offer us some good insight of what we're doing well, maybe where we can improve and stuff like that. She was very impressed with our whole culture here, our safety culture, and with the documentation that we had provided her. So from the 2017 audit, our big focus was on hazard assessment, and as we showed with those results, we hammered that home. We improved that right to where we wanted it to be. This next year, as you guys seen, element 1 was just a little bit low. So we want to just focus on interview questions, ensuring that our frontline workers see all their managers on the work sites, participating in hazard assessments, participating in everything that they are expected to as well. Yeah, that's all I really had for you guys. Did you guys have any questions or comments, anything like that?
Councillor Schnarr, please.
Actually, the mayor was first.
I called you.
Perfect, thank you. I tried. Actually, well done. Actually, being involved at work with these court audits, I know the difficulty behind it, so I appreciate what you've done. The auditor told me, don't panic, you don't want to score too high, because you have no room for improvement. So
Absolutely.
I will commend you on the work, the improvement, and there's a lot of work, so job well done.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Mayor Zahara.
Yes, through the chair to McKenna, thank you very much for your presentation. Very well done. Just a question for you. When it comes to employees and in particular those that are working on the field, do you find that there's a lot of buy-in in towards health and safety? I know sometimes there's this attitude that health and safety may not matter, or, you know, I'm the big guy on campus, I can't get hurt. Do you see that there is a positive attitude towards health and safety within the organization?
Through the chair to Mayor Zahara, yes, I think from what I see, absolutely, I think the positive safety culture it's a very positive safety culture around here. A couple other things we've implemented the past year, we've had these hazard report forms, so they're just little pocket-sized booklets that fit in their coverall pockets, and it's just to kind of keep them looking for these other hazards that they could be aware of out in the workplace. And I'm actually getting a decent amount of people reporting those. Some of them are silly little things, but again, we always want to encourage that. So writing it down, they're being aware of their hazards and stuff. But absolutely, I think it's a very positive. We don't have much problem with worker buy-in on the frontline level. They're very aware that they're also very much in the eyes of the public working here, so they're very good. I'm impressed with all our frontline workers.
One follow-up from me. The second question I have is, have we had any major incidences over the last year with workplace safety?
I'm very happy to report we have had no lost time incidents. No, none. So actually since prior to 2017. So our current TRIF, total recordable incident frequency, is 0. So it's great. Our modified work program is awesome.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Okay, through the chair. Can you tell me about neighboring municipalities, what's their percentage when they do a core assessment?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilkinson, honestly, I'm not sure. I haven't specifically asked what their percentages are for their results. I've been working quite a bit with Town of Hinton's health and safety coordinator. They're usually passing, and that's kind of all I've asked. I haven't really asked for percentages.
Okay, I just wondered how we rate it. And I have another question. Do we, for health and safety, do we ever practice an evacuation, say if a council room like this, so that we know where to go, or if we have company here, if they practice it? I noticed when we were in Hinton at the COA presentation, it was part and parcel of the meeting where the exits were, etc. And I just think maybe we should be doing that.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilkinson, I absolutely agree. I do recall there was some conversation about getting you guys aware of our emergency response plan for this building at least. So if you heard the alarm, yes, absolutely, you know where we're going. Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that, for sure, for sure.
I think if I may add to that as well, I think the mayor was here this year when we did our evacuation simulation, and so we do at least one annually where we actually physically practice our emergency response plan, and so it is an active part of our health and safety program, and we are trying to always improve it and incorporate better practices, but it is an active part of our program.
Councillor Chenard?
Yes, when you were, through Chair, when you were talking about involvement of management, do they have regular safety meetings like every 2 weeks or once a week, and tailgate meetings, and each department, that'd be a way to ensure they're up to date on safety? So do we have a regular tailgate meeting?
Through the chair to Councillor Chenard, yes, absolutely. The high hazard work, so public works, parks, utilities, maintenance, those guys, they have daily tailgates, absolutely. Every single morning they are having their tailgate, discussing the work for the day. The requirement is monthly safety meetings for the high hazard locations, quarterly safety meetings for civic center, like lower hazard work there. Was there another part of the question?
Well,
Sorry.
the only part was that, like we were saying, buy-in. So if you make the responsibility of every head, that they, head of each department, if each staff working signs off on it, then when you do your audit, you have a way of proving that, have you communicated it to each individual? Because I appreciate the fact where you're saying high hazard, but even just a regular one. Then when you, that's what I mentioned, when you do an audit, can you prove it? Yes, I can.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so that's why I was curious how often you had the meetings. It's all works bonus for your core audit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bear?
Through the chair to McKenna. So you have in the bulletin here, you listed the ERPs that you're going to be doing on all work sites once per year. Can you go through what that would look like?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, sorry. On the report details, you have the opportunities for improvement, the conduct emergency response drills for all work sites at least once per year as per the ERPs. Can you go over what that would look like?
Absolutely. Through the chair to Councillor Barr. Previously, when we just had revamped all of our emergency response plans, so for the first one, I kind of helped coordinate the emergency response drills for the previous year, but moving forward, it is absolutely going to be left up to the managers for those facilities to either coordinate with the other managers in the facility. For example, the shop, there's 3 or 4 managers out of there, to absolutely that, coordinate the drill, plan the drill. I'm hoping to do more of a kind of catch the staff off guard kind of drills, whereas they would communicate with 911 first responders, telling them we're going to be pulling the fire alarm as a drill, just to see in those real panic moments how well they are trained and how well the plans will be executed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councillor Curry?
Sorry, I think my question was asked, but I did, through the chair, sorry, you were just mentioning that we have really good buy-in with our own staff. Are you finding that's the same with contractors, or is that a different ballgame and a struggle?
Through the chair to Councillor
Curry,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
It's okay. I was going to help out
Oh, yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, no, for the most part, we've been taking the approach with contractors for our bigger projects to assign them prime. So we do our due diligence in the initial of checking their health and safety program core, C-core, and then kind of just do more monitoring of them on the projects. For the smaller contractors though, absolutely, they sit through the orientations. The managers are really good about that and ensuring they're orientated at least annually. So it's updated, it's sent to me. There are no problems at all, for sure.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Right, any other comments? Just from my own point of view, maybe I missed it during the presentation, but what was element number 1 that we
It's
decreased
titled
in?
Organizational Commitment.
So can you elaborate on that, on how we
Yeah, actually,
decreased?
I can tell you guys exactly specifically why the marks were that low. So how the scoring works for some of this element is you need 80% positive remarks in an interview to get the marks. And it's all or nothing. So if we had 79% positive remarks, we got 0. So that was exactly the case for one of them, 10-point question. We had, I think, 76%, so we got 0 out of 10. The big thing with that is it's not to say that our commitment isn't there, because it absolutely is there. It's basically stating that the employees aren't maybe able to explain to the auditor in that interview how Mike is exactly communicating his commitment to safety. So example, someone may say, well, he comes to a safety meeting every few weeks, or every few months, sorry. Okay, that's great. And then another employee could maybe say, I've never seen Mike come on the work site. Well, okay, but he does come to your guys' safety meetings. So some employees would see it as different ways of showing commitment. So I think coming from my end, I would just encourage them to maybe be more upfront about those things, like saying exactly that. I am committed to your guys' health and safety. Please don't be afraid to bring concerns. This is why we're having these safety meetings, these tailgate meetings, because we're committed to your health and safety. Like actually using the wording that they use in the audit might give us a few extra easy marks there.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, great job.
Thank you, guys.
Moving on, nothing from infrastructure and planning. We'll move on to corporate services, wastewater treatment plant grant update. I believe Sarah Bittner.
Just get myself situated here. So the purpose today is to just bring you up to date on the status of the grant for the wastewater treatment plant. So prepared a little presentation here. So the background of this was the original budget back when it was first came out was around 13 million. Sorry. The Alberta Municipal Wastewater Partnership is the name of the grant. Their portion is that very strange, precise percentage. Which came to a amount of 4.7, as you see up there. And this was approved in September of 2015. Subsequently after that, there was another application sent to the province prior to their 18-19 budget, once we knew those costs were going above the 13 million. What happened in the 18 and 19 budget with the province is they did not fund that program at all. So that program itself did not receive any funding from the government. So the application is still with the Minister. It's passed through Alberta Transportation and met the criteria and is now sitting on the Minister's desk awaiting approval. But they're now waiting to see if there's, in the 1920 provincial budget reading, if there's going to be any money that's actually been funded towards that grant program. So hopefully later in March we'll hear if anything of that's happening. So what that means is that at this time there's actually no signed agreement with the province to provide that additional funding of around $2 million. So the current issue that we're facing right now is the 2018 audit is underway and it's due into the province by May 1st. It has to be finalised and presented to council before that time, so there's a very short timeline there. Currently, the approximate $2 million of the calculated monies that is owed to us from the grant, based on that original percentage, it has been recorded as a revenue in our books and as an accounts receivable, because we're thinking we're going to be getting that money from the province. But that is actually contrary to PSAP standards, because to be sitting as a receivable, you're supposed to have that signed agreement. So it's almost like the cart before the horse a little bit on that. So to be compliant with PSAP standards, I would need to remove that revenue from the books and that receivable for the 2018 fiscal year.
Maybe you could just enlarge the acronym PSAB so that so we can make sure everyone.
Public Sector Accounting Board standards. So the ones that we all have to follow as a public sector, these are the accounting standards we have to follow. Sorry, I fell into the acronym track there. So what would happen if we left it as a receivable, if we decided we're going to just leave that as a receivable and hope for that grant to come through? It will show a grant transfer that we did not receive in the box. Because of no signed agreement, it's what's called a material amount. It'll be material misstatement on our financial statements and need to be qualified on our audit report. What that means is that they would state that the audit met PSAB standards except for this one area, and it would actually be qualified on that audit report that goes with our audit. And then if there is no grant money forthcoming in the future, the town would still need to fund this approximate $2 million from another source. I contacted Municipal Affairs to see what that would do if we had left that on, if we have that misstatement on there and it needs to be qualified. They got back to me late this afternoon, so I'm able to give you those answers.
Their response was that a qualified report is not something the town wants on their financial statements, as it is a red flag that we are not reporting account according to those standards. Municipal Affairs would review any qualified audit reports and respond accordingly once they've done their investigations into why. And this one is quite important to us, I think, into the future here. Any lenders that we have, for example, Capital Finance Authority, may also have an issue with the fact that we've had a qualification on our financial statements. So their advice would be to fund this amount for now from reserves, and when the grant funding comes through, then replenish those reserves with that. So we would meet our PSAB standards, and when the grant comes through, we can then just put that where we had funded it from. If I were to go back into the books and remove that revenue and receivable to make us compliant, this would show a deficit on the 2018 financial statements. And then we would eventually need to find this money from other sources. That would then flow through to our unrestricted surplus. And speaking with our auditor, we haven't quite finished the audit yet, but we feel when this would happen that we would end up with around 300,000 left in the unrestricted surplus, which is a fairly low amount from what I would feel comfortable leaving in there. If we are successful with the application, and if it is funded in the 1920 budget year by the province, we would then to receive that revenue in 2019, it would flow through, and we would then have a surplus at the end of 2019 to counteract the deficit we had in 18. In the event that we are not successful with that, the surplus would then remain obviously at the amount that we're at the end of 2018. This could, however, be replenished to a more healthy balance, I've put there, by reallocating some of our 19 capital funding that's coming from reserves. We have a window there where we are able to look at that. A lot of our future funding, if you remember, we've sort of allocated towards the multiplex, whereas in 19 we had allocated that more towards our capital projects with reserves. So we could replenish not necessarily all of the deficit that we have, but to bring our unrestricted surplus back up to a better balance, which is between, say, 500 to $1 million. I like to have it a little higher. It can be a little lower than the $1 million. So we could just replenish that difference from that, just to bring that up to a healthy balance. Then again, if that grant funding comes through, that would flow through as revenue, and then we could put it back to reserves or to other issues like that. So that is the update on the wastewater treatment plant grant.
I'll start over here with Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, who hasn't signed off, the municipal affairs or infrastructure?
Through the chair. It is, I believe it goes through Alberta Transportation and Infrastructure, and they are the ones that have agreed we meet the criteria and forward it to that minister. And it's at that point, because the provincial government didn't fund that whole grant, that whole wastewater grant, there was no money for them to allocate to us from the province.
Councillor Chenard?
Okay, then I guess my question, this was supposed to be signed in 2015 originally when we applied for the grant?
Go through the chair to Councillor
Yeah.
Chenard. The original one was signed when we had an original budget of around 13 million. We applied at that point. There was money in that grant. It was assigned to us, and we have received that money to date. We have received the 4.7 million that was allocated based on that original grant, the original application we put forward to the province. Then when we came back with an additional one, it met the criteria, had been forwarded to the minister for approval, but then the provincial government didn't fund that whole grant program. So nobody who had applied under that grant program received any money in the 18-19 budget year from the province.
Right, I'll just add to that. So I guess my problem, we're talking about 2 million, so at the end of the day, it wasn't anything we, meaning the town, did wrong, it was the province didn't fund it? Because I'm just trying to explain, because if we don't get it, there's 2 more million we gotta add to this project that we already went 2 million over. So I'm thinking, I don't think it's the town's fault, but it's the province. It's kind of like, we gotta absorb this 2 million and hope in 2020 we get the $2 million grant is the problem I'm having.
No, I think as administration, I think we were under the impression that we would probably be very successful in acquiring the extra grant money. We'd had another use of that grant earlier on a few years ago when we had to do a CT disinfection and outfit all our wells with that CT disinfection. That had also come in over what we had originally applied for, and that had been funded from that grant program. So I think the expectation was that this met the criteria, there wouldn't be that problem. But we put that forward to the province and did not get an actual signed agreement saying we were getting that money, and that's where this this difference has happened. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bear?
Through the chair to Ms. Bittner. So the total project was just over 17 million, and then we received some funding from the government. Is there an opportunity if this grant doesn't come through to add it to our other debenture on the project?
Through the chair to Councillor Beyer, I'm sure there's that we could look into that to bring that other money down. It would of course take away from our borrowing power into the future, moving towards the multiplex. I think we kind of wanted to keep that a little bit freer, but that's definitely an option that we could look at. I would have to check with Capital Finance. Generally, their rule is that the debentures must be drawn down before a project is begun. So I'll put a qualifier on that I would need to definitely check if that was a possibility. It may not because of that qualifier that they have on that drawing down of monies.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Zahara?
Yes, through to Ms. Bittner, and I'm a little surprised that the government didn't fund this program this budget year, because when I was in Treasury Board and Finance, this was one program that was fully subscribed at the beginning of the year. And I think we're caught in a position where transportation has a list of projects that Treasury Board hasn't financed. So they're probably just waiting for a stamp of approval from the Treasury Board. Chances are, going into an election year, there will be some funds allocated. And I would imagine that the Minister of Transportation is lobbying hard, because I know how many municipalities were applying for that fund just a few years ago. But once again, the government makes us do something and then they don't provide us with the funds to make it happen, which is unfortunate. But it's good to know that transportation has approved the application, just a matter of allocation of funds. So I think if we can reallocate and cross our fingers, hopefully we'll see the funding in the next year. And after the provincial election, I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to knock on the doors of some ministers and
introduce ourselves.
Introduce ourselves in the most nicest way possible in order to get this funding. It's unfortunate that we're at this point in time, but that's government bureaucracy for you. So.
Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, just in case it doesn't all pan out the way you just said it does. That $2 million, so are you suggesting that would probably come from are we going to be taking that from $2 million we had set aside for, where are we taking that? Can you be more clear with me, please, on where that $2 million is
Through the
coming
chair
for?
to Councillor Curry. In the 2019 capital budget, we had approved a certain number of projects that were happening. Some of them are being funded from reserves. We could reallocate some of that money to bring this unrestricted surplus back up. It doesn't have to be the whole 2 million, because we don't really need 2 million in an unrestricted surplus. Okay. But just to bring that back up to a more comfortable balance, to be within an unrestricted surplus. And that would, then we would just have to look at those projects and see, and just reassess the projects that are in that budget to allow us that that swap of finance.
Yeah, if I may just add to that through the chair, it would be administration's intent to bring a number of options back for council to consider. At the bottom line is we've got to take $2 million from somewhere else and fund it, or some portion of that. As Sarah suggested, we can, including using some of that unrestricted surplus as is suggested here. And if council was comfortable, they could say, no, we'll just leave this unrestricted surplus at $3 million and not affect those other projects. I know that Ms. Bittner would be a little uncomfortable with that from a financial perspective, but we'll include that and other options for council to consider in terms of the specific funding of that process.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to administration, we did talk that the government forced us into doing that waste treatment plant, and that's the current government that's in right now. So would it not be pertinent to go in there and make an appointment with the transportation minister and address what we need? I don't think he's running for re-election, and in the meantime, money is changing hands, because at Parkland Lodge, we just got the good news that we've got $8 million in Evergreens Foundation that will be used in Hinton, and this build is going to be a complete government build. So that's a big shocker, and if they can find $8 million, surely they can help us out.
I'll just say a word there, and I think the mayor would like to add to that. By all means, it's always our prerogative to approach the government and have those conversations, and administration would be happy to reach out to the ministry and initiate those conversations. I would just suggest where we are in the political realm is it's probably unlikely that we gain any traction in the short term, but Mayor, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so through to Councillor Wilkinson, we've made 3 requests to meet with the Minister of Transportation in the last 12 months. I think he's been busy on the golf course looking forward to retirement, because he chooses not to meet with us, even though he promises us that he's going to meet with us at UMA. And we are still waiting for some traffic lights that were also promised by Alberta Transportation. I think at this point, where we are in the process, you're looking at a year-end for the provincial government, where I think they've already set where they're making their announcements. Maybe they'll make a big announcement for wastewater treatment plants in the next few weeks, but I think we really have to look at what's going to happen after the election and meet with the new minister in order to make this happen. I would suggest that they already know where they're spending their money for this budget year, and the new budget will really be indicative of what we will be getting or not be getting moving forward. So it's unfortunate. We've had a number of issues related to Alberta Transportation. A lot of them have been dealt with on the local level, and I give credit to our local representatives at Alberta Transportation, but the minister has been has declined 3 meeting requests in the last year from the town of Edson. So
We'll move on to Councillor Bear.
Through the chair to CAO Derek Hutt. Do you think there's any value in writing a letter to the current people running in the local political parties to inform them of our need, and that whoever is elected afterwards, we will be addressing it?
Thank you. Yeah, through the chair, though we are always open, and certainly if council was to direct, we'd be happy to do that. Part of our thinking was, I think, in alignment with the mayor, to see if there was going to be any kind of budget announcements or pre-election loosening of the purse strings that may alleviate this. And if not, then I would maybe, certainly administration will, if we don't hear anything prior to the election, will recommend that council do make the political contacts to ensure that this is known and understood. And I think those that are on council previous will remember, and I've always said, hey, we have no problem building this, but it's the province's mandate that we build this, and our expectation is that they will support this appropriately. And I think that message at the end of the day does need to come from the political level. I just think now it's a matter of timing with the election, and certainly once the election is called, I don't have any problem with us sending a letter to the candidates saying, hey, here for your consideration, here's an issue for the town of Edson that we would be interested in having some dialogue on with whoever is successful to represent our riding.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, just to both. We have met before with Minister Mason and had success when we met with him. And I just don't think it's right that he can just turn us down for 3 meetings. I think maybe we need to go to the Premier and express our concern and say, we do want a meeting with him and we want it now. Because we were told to build this. We've done it, and I think that we deserve to get this back money.
All right. I don't have any further questions. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your finger. Councillor
If I'm not
Chenard.
mistaken, wasn't the involvement of the federal government made us do this too? Because this water treatment plant, it came up through like 2012-13, because we were supposed to have it complete by 16, and we did not because of funding. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think when it started coming up in 12, 13, it was both levels of government, because that was the frustrating part for council, is they told us you had to build it no matter what, even though the present system was suiting, but because they changed the rules. And then just to add to the political end of it, we have no choice. We have to pay the 2 million, and then, because even with the government changing hands or ministers, who knows who's in power, probably we'll get zero answers until after the election, and whoever the new minister, as you said, whoever party's in power. So right now, I think we're just spinning our wheels, writing letters, meetings. If they decline 3 meetings in a row, they're not about to say, yeah, we're gonna meet with you now with an election coming. So we have to pay it, hope for the best. I agree with some of the comments around the table. There's a really good chance, no matter who's in power, they've always funded it, we will get the money. So yes, the 2 million, and then we should get it to replace it.
Thank you. If I may,
Derek, huh?
thank you. Just in reference to the federal government, there are some federal standards that were in play with the design,
Yes.
but they've had nothing to do, and there is no program in terms of federal grant funding. They push that through the provinces, and so in terms of the funding piece, we I think are working directly with the province. Our project was designed to meet all the federal regulations, which are basically mirrored through Alberta environment and dictate how we operate and how we design the facility.
Mayor Zahara?
Yeah, I also want to clarify too, this is not, I don't think, an Alberta Minister of Transportation issue, it's more of a Treasury Board decision. So the minister can lobby all he wants, but really it's up to Treasury Board. And Treasury Board has X amount of dollars, X amount of projects right across this province. So there's really, I don't think, a lot of things we can do with Alberta Transportation in particular, but I think that certainly we can apply some pressure and make sure that parties are aware that we have $2 million outstanding funding commitment here that's outstanding with the province, and see if we can get some political commitment on that heading into the election, that it will be funded. And I'm sure there's other municipalities that are in the same boat as us as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that, just to keep in mind that this is not just the town of Edson. The entire grant program for the province was unfunded through this budget year. And so there's a stack of projects that are approved in principle, as in the projects themselves are approved, but are unfunded. And so just to add to the mayor's comments, even if we were to meet with the Minister of Transportation, I think his message would simply be, I've already approved your project, I believe in your project, it's a good project, but I don't have any money from the Treasury Board to fund it. So it's a little bit of a difficult dynamic, I think, there. So.
All right. Just in closing, I didn't hear any comments of dissent against your recommendations, so hopefully you have enough to move forward.
So our intent would to bring this item back to next week's council meeting with some recommendations on specifically how we would address the funding piece.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Moving on to community services, we'll have an update on the Boys and Girls Club core and in-kind funding from Jim Destel, I believe.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Further to direction from council to dig into the in-kind contributions we make to the Boys and Girls Club, I've prepared the report and the memo that's before you. As you can see, quite a bit of in-kind is given to the Boys and Girls Club in the form of what we consider maintenance and support, as well as what we consider a difference in fair market value for rent and what they actually receive. Based on the totality of what they receive, both in total grant funding, the $40,000, and the in-kind portion, you can see that the total value of what they receive is approximately $200,000 a year from the town of Edson in value. And the recommendations or the discussion points I present at the end of the memo are more to address how should we move forward with this information. In part one, I'm recommending that we start by providing them with a letter detailing the value that they receive from the town of Edson. Maybe it would be easier to discuss these things piece by piece as we go through it.
It's your presentation. What would you like to do?
Well, I think just because they're kind of connected, I think probably discussing each component in the order that they are might be the easiest way.
I might suggest, I think, if I may, through the chair, I think because they are so connected, it might be easiest, Jim, if you just give a brief outline of each of the
Okay.
recommendations, and then council can have a conversation,
Sure.
understanding kind of the whole context
Okay.
of that.
I will do that.
Yep.
So the first recommendation is, of course, to encapsulate the contents of the memo in a letter to the Boys and Girls Club Executive Director and the chairperson of their board. I've already met with them in a meeting, advising them of what the value is they are receiving, also to talk about other issues that are potentially looming for the Boys and Girls Club and what steps they are taking to address those. Secondly, the grant funding that they receive currently through FCSS is $40,000. There's $35,000 in core funding. There's $5,000 that they receive for after-school programming. Teen programming, and that's the actual cash value that they receive from us every year. We're currently in the midst of preparing a funding agreement to capture that for this year. The timelines are coming up fairly soon, and we will prepare that as we normally do. And part of that funding agreement is that they have to provide us with documentation explaining how the money was used for that year, or the previous year. The next component has to do with a lease agreement. Like many nonprofit groups that we work with, the formal relationships aren't all captured in an agreement that is formal. We're attempting to reevaluate these processes to capture what is actually taking place in a formal agreement, to make it all transparent and everybody knows where each party stands in these relationships. So it is our hope in community services that as we move through this process, that we can capture a lot of what's happening over there in a new lease agreement that will take them to some point in the future where they're either going to move into a new building that potentially might be owned by us, or some other arrangement is worked out.
If I just
Yeah,
may add to two quick things, thank you. One is as it's noted in the report there, that this adjustment would change the Boys and Girls Club status in terms of a grant fund organization to push them over the $100,000 threshold of the financial disclosure policy that we have, which would then mean they would have to meet the requirements as set out in that policy for reporting and otherwise, which we think is a positive thing for both the town and the club. And the second thing is one of the complicating factors to where we are now with this arrangement is that the Boys and Girls Club is currently running a daycare program out of the building. And so we will have to have some conversation about how we try to separate the daycare portion of the Boys and Girls Club program from the general operations of the Boys and Girls Club program, because I think it is not council's intention to fund or subsidize a child care program when there are other providers in the community that are not benefiting from the same type of arrangement. And so that is a complicating factor that I think council will really need to consider. Administratively, we recommend that the objective be to try and achieve that separation where we would in some way charge them appropriately for the rental of the spaces that are used primarily for daycare spaces, or a portion of the building that is used for that space, as in the town is not going to subsidize the rent, and they would actually have to pay the rental for those spaces. But just putting that to there so council can consider that as you discuss. But anything to add to that there?
No,
Jim?
that's perfect. I was going to touch on that. And there's different ways, of course, we could go about billing them for the space the daycare occupies. We could use a square footage component and extrapolate that into a lease rate, and also that would be inclusive of some of the other in-kind that we provide them as well.
All right. I know it's normal for the chair to speak last, but I just feel I must say something before, because the information will be helpful to my fellow councillors and mayor. I'm not sure if it's a typo, but it says in the briefing the rental space in town rents for $10 to $15 per square foot per month. I don't know if that's a typo, but it should say $10 to $15 a square foot per year. So, and then the further calculation of $11,000 a month for this building is quite unrealistic. You would never get $11,000 a month for that building in Edson.
Thank you.
But I do generally support this entire initiative, so I'll open it up to other questions. Yes, Councillor Chouinard.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. So I don't have a calculator in front of me. What would that total up to? Because if it's wrong at 11,000, because I agree what we're trying to do here is since we are funding them, the transparency is there. Like we went after 3 other organizations in town that we fund to be transparent or show us how they spend the money with the Boys and Girls Club. If we're over that $100,000 threshold, I totally agree. They must report to us in reasonable length of time how they're spending the funds. The other comment about the daycare, I totally agree with, that we cannot be funding a daycare which is running in competition with our taxpayers that are running business. But there's a rough calculation to figure out where are we over that 100,000 threshold.
Yeah, I think if I may, just very basically, if it's 10 to 15 square foot a month, if the 215, if you were to half that, it's more like $5,000 or $6,000 per month, which is between $60,000 and $70,000 a year.
So that would put us a total over the 100,000.
It would still put us over the $100,000 threshold. Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to anybody that knows, how do the Boys and Girls Club get their funding? Like, is there a national organization? There's Boys and Girls Clubs in every town. Do they fund them?
Just Jim, by all means, share what you know. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, what I've been able to determine is that there are multiple streams of funding that are available for the Boys and Girls Clubs. There is funding through national. There is there's other money they can tap into for funding as well. The local branch does receive quite a bit of funding through the town of Edson. The other communities also support similarly their Boys and Girls Clubs, but they're just like when you're dealing with sports fields and fees, and every community seems to have a different flavor of how they deal with their specific groups.
And one other element, one other important element of Boys and Girls funding is also sponsorship. Local businesses and private individuals will sponsor it. So while they do have access to national funding, that's only a smaller portion, I think, of their total operations, and they do rely on either the local community town or the local community, the business community, and or user fees to generate the revenue they need to operate.
And they do feel a huge need in any town.
Absolutely.
Huge need.
Councillor Curry.
I support moving forward with how you've got this laid out. I support us supporting the Boys and Girls Club, and I think it's really important. And just Councillor Wilkinson, anything that I've dealt with in communities, it's usually been the same way, like through buildings, right? It's like not financial as much. Right. But I do believe we need to be much more transparent about that actual funding, because I think currently when we have those budget conversations, it would look like we are funding them about $40,000. And I just think for the other organizations, we've expected that of any of our organizations that we provide grants to. And they just happen to be in a money sense of actual cash flow. But I do think that it's necessary, and especially at this amount, I don't think that I was fully aware of the full amount that we were spending. So I do think that this needs to be done, and I do think that that comes into that audit, and how money is being spent in that does matter. And definitely as far as the daycare goes, I do not believe we should be subsidizing that at all.
Councilor Bear? Oh, sorry, I'll give
Sorry,
it.
Mr. Chair, I just want to
Chance
comment that we will revisit these figures and definitely adjust them.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Councilor Bear?
Through the chair to administration, I also support your recommendations here, and that prior to reading this, I didn't realize that we were funding them this much either. I knew there were in-kind donations, but I didn't realize the extent of that, including the power and utilities, and then other building-related aspects. I did have a question. So through our financial disclosure and accountability policy, if we are proceeding in that direction, is there anything that that we have to do that they're responsible for to receiving that money? That their responsibilities, the grant recipients. Is there anything there that we have to gather from them before we go forward, or do we just start incorporating it like where we are now and then moving it for next year?
I think if you look at the financial disclosure reporting policy, you'll see that it's more principle based than specifics. Things like, we expect that they are competitive in their purchasing processes, and then we would just ask them to demonstrate that they had an internal policy on purchasing that matches up with those types of requirements. So, but I don't believe there's anything that would stop us from a relatively immediate implementation of the policy, and then we would obviously work with them as we are the other organizations to put the appropriate pieces in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Zahara?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your work on this. When I was president many years ago, we as a board didn't even know how much the town of Edson was contributing. We paid the $4,800, and I remember having a board meeting, and they wanted to come to the town for more money. And I said, well, do you even know that our rent isn't even paying the utilities of this building that they're providing for us? And it was a big surprise. So I think this is really good information for them as well as us. And I agree, from a public standpoint, I don't think the public understands exactly how much we've been contributing and supporting that organization. And I think it's important that we are putting procedures and policies in place that impact everybody the same, that some organizations are getting treated different than others. I think they provide a valuable service to our community, and I do support moving forward in this direction. And I know that there are some municipalities that don't fund the Boys and Girls Club at all, and others provide a tremendous amount of support, and as Mr. Desatel said, it really depends community to community.
Okay. Do you have enough to move forward, administration?
I believe I do.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right. We don't have any information items, but we do have one sundry item, moving a council meeting time and location.
I think I won't say much of this. This was generated by the Youth Council, and I believe there's a rep from the Youth Council prepared to speak to it, Councillor Beyer. So.
Okay,
Councilor.
so we had a meeting last night, and in the Youth Council policy that we developed recently says that each school is supposed to have a meeting that they are organizing at their school location. So because we started partway through the year, we're just going to choose one school, and that is HRH. Those youth counselors stepped up and are planning on organizing that. And we realized that we're getting closer to the end of the school year, and if we want to set a different date or time of that meeting, then we need to start this process now and give the rest of the council an opportunity to say their thoughts on this, as well as trying to arrange a time that is suitable for the school. So last night, the HRH youth counselors mentioned that there is a specific block on Thursday mornings that they often get presenters, and that works really well for their school, and they felt that that would be the best time for them. And that time was from 9:50 to 10:50. So they're asking if we can start our meeting at that time at 9:50 and then go as long as our meeting needs to go. But there might be an opportunity to engage other students in the school at that meeting if we can coordinate it with the school that way. And the 2 dates we had in mind, just looking at the calendar, not noting anything specific about them, was Thursday, April 18th and Thursday, May 2nd, both at 9:50 on Thursday. And we just wanted to bring it to council to see at the committee, the whole meeting, to see if that was something that was favorable for you. And then I believe we would have to bring it to a council meeting to make a motion to change those dates, correct? Okay, so
Thank you.
that's all I've got.
Councillor Bear, did we hear back from the school if those 2 days work?
No, so the youth counselor did contact me, but the school administration, the upper staff were away today, so she's going to hopefully hear back from them tomorrow.
Okay, excellent. Councillor Chenard.
Okay, one of my questions was on the dates, but in all fairness, like we chose HRH and they're like junior high. So I think because they're junior high to high school, I'm thinking in fairness, we should tell them we're picking a date and be fair to Parkland, because I believe youth council, do we have any Parkland?
Yes.
If I may,
Okay.
was put out to all the kids, and HRH decided they wanted to do the first one. Parkland was not ready to do one just yet.
I don't mean the first one, but a
Yeah.
second one, because because we have a committee of the whole, so I agree, we'll let HRH be first. But because we still have time, like, let's be fair to these youth council, because they run till the end of the year, so we have opportunity in September to go to their school as well?
Yes.
Because that's the question I'm asking, let's be fair to both, because they are junior, senior, and let's be fair to the other school, and maybe opportunity, I'm sure between now and the end of June, they could probably fit us in. I'd like to go to both schools.
But Councillor Bear reply to that.
Through the chair to Councillor Chenard, I forgot one more piece of information, was that the youth councillors mentioned to us that the end of May or middle of May to the end of June is a very time for them, a very busy time with exams, and that they felt it would be challenging for them to host a meeting at their school during that time.
Okay.
And they're also done full meeting.
Councillor Bevan.
Through the chair,
Committee or-
Councilor Byer, those 2 days do not work for me. I have other meetings starting at 9:30 in the morning, so I won't be able to make either one of those. If we could move it to leave it on the Tuesdays like we have, and go in the mornings, that's our regular council meetings, you know, it'd be better if possible. And I understand that, you know, it is a youth and that's what they're talking about, so.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
Sure, Councillor.
Just to clarify, our council meetings are not in the morning, but they are on Tuesday.
No, what I'm saying, we could
Oh,
move
on
those
the
2
day.
days to the
Okay.
morning if we could.
Mayor Zahara.
For me, either one of those dates work. I believe though we will be talking budget on May 2nd, so April 18th is probably a better date for the meeting, unless there's another date that works for the school. But I'm pretty flexible.
Yeah, thank you. Administratively, yeah, we certainly are targeting the May 7th meeting for the finalization of the budget prior to tax notices being produced, which would mean that that committee meeting on the 23rd would be a budget, there'd be some budget related discussions there. So just administration is supportive of the mayor's feedback there, that the 18th certainly, from a timeline perspective for administration, would make the most sense.
Any Councillor Curry.
I can make the 18th work.
Do you want to go
to
around the table?
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Bevan has spoke, Councillor Curry has spoke, Councillor Chenard.
I will make either date work. I
Okay.
believe in youth council.
I will make them work as well. Councillor Wilkinson.
I can make either date work.
Okay, and I can also make you the
Okay, excellent.
I can make the May 2nd one too. I was
Okay.
just listening to them.
Great.
Okay.
So do you have enough moving forward?
Yeah, so administration would just bring back a motion for next meeting, suggesting that we make a move of a meeting to April 18th, pending obviously
Pending the school.
Yeah.
availability of the school.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right, moving forward. Do we have any questions from media and public regarding items from this committee of the whole meeting?
I'm not
All right, any from the public? Yes.
And just in regards to the sewage treatment plant, so if I understand correctly, the $2 million that you applied for funding from the provincial government that was approved but not sent out, this money has already been spent, so this project is moving ahead whether this $2 million comes or not, right?
That's correct, yes.
So, as of now, what is the total cost of this project supposed to be? I didn't hear that anywhere in your...
Sarah Bittner, or
The final cost came in at $18.4 million.
Okay.
any other questions?
I'll just make mention that the water treatment plant is fully operational, wastewater treatment plant is fully operational now, so it's, yeah, we're past the point of turning back in time.
You're paying for it already.
Yeah.
14.25.
Well, every month I'm paying for it.
Exactly.
All right, hearing no other questions, I will ask for a motion to have a closed meeting session regarding a personal matter, FOIP Act, Section 17(4) and 24. Councillor Curry will make that motion. All in favor? Carried. Emily, thank you for your time.
2-minute potty break.
All right, can I have a motion that the meeting be adjourned? Councillor Schwinar makes a motion. All in favor? As Deputy Mayor of the Town of Edson, I call this meeting adjourned.
Oh, you like that.